All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. It's Monday. We're going to go around the horn. Let's get into it. Texas and Kansas. Talked about it on Friday. This is a must-win for Texas for a lot of reasons. Not just to go get another win, right, to keep their Big 12 championship hopes alive. But this was a big opportunity to bounce back from a really disappointing weekend. It was a big opportunity to take another step forward as a program. The opponent doesn't really matter in this type of situation. What matters is how the team responds after a disappointing home game when they got to go on the road, when they're a team that's lately hasn't been good on the road. And they were able to go on the road and just absolutely dominate the football game. Keys to the game, I thought, were establish the running game, get Ewers back on track, be disciplined but disruptive on defense, and then play a clean game. Establish the running game. They obviously did that. I talked in my prediction about them running over the top of KU, and that's what I meant by that, like really just imposing their will in the running game. They had over 400 yards of rushing in that game. Bijan had 230-something yards rushing in that game. They definitely established the running game. Get Ewers back on track. Ewers wasn't great. Again, he missed on some throws. He also had some drops again. I think he came in at about 107 yards passing, 1 touchdown. His completion percentage wasn't very good, 57%. Not sure they got Ewers back on track, but they certainly didn't put him in a position like they have a couple of times over the course of the last 4 games where they basically put it all in his hands and said, dude, you got to go win us a football game. So I think from a confidence perspective, he's back on track. We'll see. They got Baylor coming in on Friday. We'll talk about that one later in the week. Be disciplined but disruptive on defense. I thought they did a really good job of that. Jaden Daniels obviously was a little rusty. Early on, the pressure really got to him. As the game went on, he started to settle into the game a little more, started making some plays. And really, the first-team defense, he didn't do anything against those guys. It wasn't until late in the game. I think he had 240 yards passing and a couple touchdowns. All that stuff happened late in the game where majority of the players on the field for Texas were backups. A lot of them not even backups, third-string guys. So I thought the defense did exactly what they needed to do to put Texas in a good position to win that game. And then I said, let's play a clean game. And I think for the most part they did. I don't recall there being just a overwhelming amount of penalties in this game either way. So I think overall the keys to the game, Texas touched on almost all of them, and that's what you have to do to go win football games, right? So my prediction for the game was 31-27. I was way off on that, but I did say that they would get the running game back on track. So yeah, man, good game for Texas. Good game, good bounce back for Steve Sarkisian. I know he got a lot of backlash after the TCU game just for the play calling and just for sort of the overall position Texas was in going into that weekend and just how shitty really the weekend turned out for him. So good to see him get back on. I mean, it's really easy when you can go run the ball the way they can run the ball. And I know I've been critical of him saying he gives up on the run too early. You can't just run the ball when running the ball is working. You have to be able to run the ball all the time. You have to be able to say, we need to go run the ball and go run the ball, even if it means you don't pick up first downs. So, again, big win for Texas. They've got Baylor coming in. Baylor's psyche is going to be a little interesting in this game. We'll talk about it a little later, but actually we'll talk about it right now. Let's talk about these upset alert recaps. So the last couple of weeks, I've talked about a few games that I thought teams were on upset alert. I did really well the first week. One of my upset alerts actually got upset, and the other one played a really close game that they just barely got out of alive. So let's see how we did this week. So the upset alert games that I talked about last Friday were TCU at Baylor, Ole Miss at Arkansas, USC at UCLA, and Texas at Kansas. So let's talk about the first one, TCU at Baylor. I talked about TCU coming off a very emotional win against Texas, kind of one of those moments in the season where a lot of people were already talking about who was going to be in the playoffs because you were about to get beat. A lot of people talking about Texas was going to boat race TCU. A lot of people calling for 3-touchdown win over TCU by Texas. And TCU went on the road, and Darrell K. Royal was hostile. It was not a fun place to play for them that night. They went on the road. They battled through a lot of adversity, and they found a way to win that game. And a lot of times that can be really taxing emotionally, and close games of a physical nature, the way that game was, are always taxing physically. So I was kind of concerned, could TCU get ready again and go on the road and play another game like that? And again, Baylor's not a great team, but Baylor's got some weapons and they do some things well. They're good enough to beat TCU if TCU doesn't have a good effort. And, man, they found a way to win again. They kicked a last-second field goal. Baylor really let that game slip away. I felt like Baylor's coaches just almost – that last offensive drive just sort of felt like the game was over. There was just something about what was going on. It made me think, like, are these guys serious right now? Like, that, there's no way they're not trying to get a first down. You get a first down there and the game is over. But that last-second field goal was super interesting for a couple of reasons for me. One, Sonny Dykes says he planned it. That's absolute bullshit. There's no way on earth that his idea – there's no way to even plan for that. I mean, of course, coaches say – we've got to be able to run the field goal unit on the field quickly if we have to. Like, I remember practicing that in high school. I remember practicing it in college. I get it. Like, they do that. But there's no way he had a plan for 11 seconds left, 16 seconds. I forgot exactly what it was. It was under 20 seconds. Let's run the ball. Let's run the offense off the field, run the kicking team on the field, and kick a last second, I think it was 40 yards, 35 yards. Relatively mid-distance kick, let's say. You don't plan for that. So that's bullshit, Sonny Dykes. Stop. You got lucky is what you did. The other thing that's interesting about that play to me was, are you not subbing people when you run your entire offense off the field and your kicking team onto the field? And shouldn't it be the official's job to stand over the ball and allow the other team to substitute as well? And I'm totally just asking the question. I'm not saying that the officials didn't do their job or that TCU shouldn't have even been able to get the kickoff. But I don't know. Does anybody out there know what the rule is? Is there a special rule for special teams? And in fact, later on in the day, and I can't remember what game it was, I actually saw officials run out and hold the ball while the other team was flipping out their offense for their kicking team. So I think TCU not only got lucky that the clock didn't run down and run out at all, but I think they got a gift because the officials didn't do their job. I don't know. You guys let me know. hornfanspodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure this will be up on TikTok. It'll be up on YouTube. Let me know what you guys think. I think TCU got away with one. But anyway, they were one of my upset alert picks. They almost got upset. Ole Miss at Arkansas. For the second week in a row, I talked about Fayetteville being just a tough place to play and visiting teams not wanting to go there. Talked about Ole Miss losing a close one to Alabama, the emotional and physical taxation of that, and then having to go on the road and play an Arkansas team that, again, their record doesn't show it, but they've got some good players. They're a dangerous team. And not only did Ole Miss get upset, they got absolutely trounced. 40-12, or I think it was 40-12. A lot to not a lot was the score of that game. And Ole Miss just didn't show up. Or maybe they did show up. Maybe that's Ole Miss. One of the interesting things I've always thought about the SEC, just watching, and I've never been a guy that just constantly watches their games, and I'm certainly not one of those guys that's, an SEC bias guy. Like, I remember for a while there was all this talk about SEC bias, and generally I think maybe there was bias, but I still feel like those teams that were on the good end of a lot of that bias, they were really good teams, right? Like they went and proved it on the field. But I think there has been these last few years this sort of play that plays out, the scene that plays out every year where you've got a few SEC teams that are ranked really high. You maybe have some middle-of-the-road SEC teams that are, ranked in the teens. Every year the SEC preseason, they'll have like 8 or 9 teams ranked in the top 25. And then they just all start beating each other. And when one beats one, the one that loses doesn't drop that far. The one that wins goes up significantly because they beat a really highly ranked team. And then they all just kind of lose to each other for the most part. And everybody just plays like this round robin game of just kind of replacing the other team. But if you look at their record this year out of conference, it's not all that great, man. And just look at the games they've played out of conference. It's not amazing. So I don't know. Some of these SEC teams that are highly ranked, they're just, I'm not saying that the coaches or the AP have a lot of other options. I'm not trying to say they don't deserve to be there. I just don't think they're that much better teams in a lot of cases than other conference teams. Anyway, kind of got off on a tangent there. Third game I had was USC, UCLA. Thought that game sort of being on the road at UCLA. UCLA had sold out the Rose Bowl, which after watching the game, it sounded like there was a lot of USC fans there. The running game of UCLA, I thought maybe could keep USC off the field. Talked about Chip Kelly sort of having a lot more experience in those types of games than Lincoln Riley. And for the first half, everything I talked about held true. UCLA still had a chance late in that one to win after it really kind of got away from them a little bit. Thompson Robinson, quarterback for UCLA, he basically killed his team. He threw 3 really bad picks. He had a fumble that was recovered by USC. I think 2 of those picks at least were in the first half, right there, sort of back-to-back in the second quarter. Just really, it's hard to win when you give up the ball 4 times. So anyway, it was a close game again. USC was definitely in a position where they could have lost that game. And then the fourth one was Texas at Kansas, and I completely missed on this. I just felt like with Texas losing that game to TCU and sort of all of the things they had to play for that year basically now being gone, that Texas would kind of do what Texas has done a lot over the course of the last 10 years. And when adversity hits, they just kind of stop playing. They did not do that at all. So really good job by Steve Sarkisian to get the team ready to play again, and good job by all those players. There was a lot of games this weekend where the weather was not great. Probably 80% of the country had really cold weather this weekend, and they went out on a cold, windy day and did what they had to do. So congrats to Steve Sarkisian again. Congrats to the players. Made me miss on that one pretty hard, but that's all right. I'm still really good on these, so I'm going to keep doing them. We'll keep doing upset alerts. I know we're kind of winding down to the end of the season, but all right. Conference championship pictures, they're starting to be a lot clearer. Finally get some clarity, right? So the Big 12 is pretty easy. TCU's in. K-State controls its own destiny. They beat Kansas State, and they're a huge favorite. That game is in Manhattan. They're a 17.5 or 16.5 point favor over Kansas. I don't see any way Kansas wins that game. I guess stranger things have happened. If somehow Kansas State lose that game, Texas wins their game against Baylor, Texas will be in, and we'll get our rematch, TCU against Texas. But I said it a few weeks ago. I really felt like Kansas State was the most consistent team, and I feel like they're going to handle business with KU, and they'll be the ones in that game. And I think, early prediction, I think whoever plays TCU again is going to beat TCU. I don't think TCU is going to be undefeated the entire year. I don't think TCU is going to make it to the college football playoff. So the Big 12, pretty clear. Oklahoma State would have still been in the running, except they got the shit beat out of them by Oklahoma. SEC, Georgia, and LSU. See how that game goes. I don't really have – I feel like Georgia wins that game pretty easily, honestly. But we'll have to look at it when it's time to look at it. Pac-12, USC is in with a win over UCLA. Oregon currently controls its own destiny. They have to go on the road. I don't know if they go on the road, but they have to play Oregon State, sort of their little rivalry game. And Washington, with their win, has an outside shot. Washington's got Washington State this weekend. If they win that game and Oregon loses, Washington will be in. But a lot clearer there in the Pac-12 than it could have been if UCLA would have won that game against USC. Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State winner will be in. And that's going to be an interesting game. Michigan's really outstanding tailback appeared to suffer some sort of knee injury. I did hear that there was nothing structurally damaged in his knee, which is great to hear. But a running back needs to not have a lot of pain in his knee. He needs a lot of mobility in his knee. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays. I think going into that game, if he's healthy, Michigan's the clear favorite. Without him, I think Ohio State is the clear favorite. So it'll be interesting to see over the course of the week to hear from Michigan whether he's going to play or not. I haven't heard. I'm assuming he sprained his knee, and I've done that before, and there's varying degrees of a sprained knee. It can be quite painful. I definitely know that, and I think the other thing is the mobility. You sprain your knee, it's going to be swollen. It's just not going to feel right. So I don't know. I hope he plays. In games like this, you want everybody to be on board and on deck. So hopefully he can get his knee in good shape and be able to go. The West is a 3-horse race with Purdue, Iowa, and Minnesota all having a shot. I tried to sit down and break down all the different possibilities last night, and I got tired of it. And it doesn't really matter. None of those 3 teams are going to beat Michigan or Ohio State. So the Big Ten really needs to split the divisions a different way. I don't know what that looks like for them, but I think if you go back in time, like basically forever, and have the divisions they are right now, you would see Michigan and Ohio State game being the deciding factor. And it kind of reminds me of how the Big 12 used to be when they were split into divisions, and the Big 12 South for a very long time depended on who won the Red River Shootout. So I don't know. I like the division thing because you can have two clear good teams. I also think there's an argument for playing everybody and picking the top two teams. I think if the Big Ten would do that, it would be to the betterment of their product. Nobody's going to watch the Big Ten championship game. ACC, you got Clemson and North Carolina, despite North Carolina dropping a game to Georgia Tech. I don't think that one's particularly exciting either. I know Clemson's gotten better offensively, and they were always pretty good defensively. I don't know. They're just not an exciting team to me anymore like they kind of used to be. College football playoff picture changed a lot. Well, potentially. Thought it was interesting. You know, you've been hearing a lot out of Tennessee fans, and this happens a lot. You hear this a lot, almost every single year, when there's kind of like this upstart team that isn't. They're not quite in the picture, but they're right there. They're having a really good season. Everybody in the fan base starts focusing on, well, they should be in, and there's no way TCU should be in. And you know, if you look on TikTok, you've seen the guys. I know you've seen them. There's 2 or 3 of these Tennessee guys that are just updating us every single thing that happens. Are you guys watching this? Are you guys watching TCU right now? There's no way they deserve a shot at the college football playoffs. And then invariably their team just goes out and just lays an egg. Just terrible. So yeah, in the stretch of 3 weeks, Tennessee went from the number 1 team in the country in the college football playoff to they're not going to make the playoff. And now, unfortunately, I don't know I don't know who they play this week. They'll certainly be in a bowl game, but unfortunately, Hendon Hooker tore his ACL. That's rough news. You hate to ever see that. I think the timing of it for him, you know, personally is just terrible. I don't know what his draft stock was like. I don't really pay attention to that stuff, but I would assume he was in a position to possibly be drafted. I don't know how this affects that. To me, he's kind of one of those borderline type guys, right? Like lots of stats, but he's never really been on anybody's radar. You know, you have some guys. There's pro scouts talking about Quinn Ewers right now being the number 1 pick after next year, and there's like nothing to support it. Where on the other hand, this guy lighting it up statistically, but I don't know where he sits on the whole draft thing, and I don't know how an injury like that at this time of year affects that. So that sucks for him. Obviously, it sucks for Tennessee fans as well. I mean, I know that was their guy. So I don't know. We'll see what happens the rest of the year for TCU. But the college football playoff, with Tennessee losing that game, switches a little bit. You've got USC and LSU on the outside looking in now. You still got 4 undefeated teams there at the top. Do you have 4 undefeated teams? We got Michigan, Ohio State, TCU, and Georgia. Yeah, so 4 undefeated teams there at the top. One of Michigan and Ohio State is going to lose. Is there a scenario where the Big Ten gets the SEC treatment like we've seen over the past few years, where even the team that doesn't win the conference championship gets in, or maybe a team that loses the conference championship game still gets in? Could the Big Ten get 2 teams this year? Could that push USC and LSU out of the picture, even with one of those teams losing? The other scenario is who all gets in if say USC wins the pack, which I think is pretty reasonable. And let's say LSU plays a really close game against Georgia in the Actually, I think LSU doesn't win the championship game. There's no way they can get in. So we'll scratch that one. LSU's got to win to get in, and they need some help, I think. USC is a different story, though. Let's say Michigan or Ohio State, one of those teams is going to lose. Does USC jump over one of those teams? Even in a close game? Like, let's say Michigan and Ohio State is like a really competitive game, like ultra competitive, not low scoring, but not just like shootout. So you can play the whole defense angle. Let's say it's, 28-27 or something. Does a close game like that get the loser in, or does USC just jump because they're the Pac-12 champion? I don't know the answer. I don't think it's necessarily going to matter because I think TCU is going to lose. I said that earlier. I mean, I know they keep winning, and they're a good team. Obviously they're a good team. They're 11-0, and they found like every single way to win a game. You can win a game this year. I just don't think they're that good. I don't know. We'll see. I really do think TCU loses the rematch with whoever they end up playing in the Big 12 championship game. What's going on down in Aggie Land again? I'm sure most of y'all saw the picture of Kyle Field in the second half. There was like nobody there, like 10 people in the stands. And that place holds 109,000, I think. They eke out a win 20-3 over 1-10 UMass. UMass has got to be like one of the worst teams in college football. I don't know. I don't understand. I don't see how they don't fire that guy. I don't see how you can keep that guy. I mean, financially it's going to hurt to get rid of that guy. But if your goal is to, be a good football program, Jimbo Fisher ain't your guy. It is insane the ups and downs of this program over the course of the last roughly 365 days. And if you balance what they're getting towards what the expectations are, and it's not just their fans that are like, we're going to be in the college. It's not just them. The media every single year is like, they're going to be in it. This is the year they're going to win the SEC West. It's happened like 2 years in a row now where they were supposed to be, it was supposed to happen for them. And it is not, and it's not even not just happening. Like, it gets worse and worse every year. So yeah, I really don't see how Jimbo Fisher survives. I think it's about to come crumbling down. I think more and more players are going to start leaving that program. It's rough. Can't sell your soul to the devil sometimes. It doesn't always work out, I guess. Bedlam. We didn't preview Bedlam, and I kind of just forgot that one, oddly enough. I watched most of it. It was pretty terrible. Spencer Sanders had 4 turnovers in that game. And it was really the big difference in the game. I think, Oklahoma got a 28-point first-half lead basically off turnovers. And then Oklahoma State just kind of chipped their way back. Couldn't get close enough to win the game. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not overly surprised that Oklahoma was able to win that game. It was at home, and anything can happen at Bedlam. I am kind of surprised Spencer Sanders wet the bed the way he did. Tennessee got droned. We talked about that a little bit. That's a tough one. Tough one for Tennessee fans. I don't think a lot of people expected that. I don't think a lot of people nobody expected that. Nobody expected them to give it 63 to 31 or whatever it was. But I don't think anybody thought there was much of a chance Tennessee was going to lose that game at all. Their defense is just bad trash. And that's the only way to describe it. I don't know what South Carolina's done most of the season. I know the record's not good, and I know they haven't scored 63 points on anybody. Spencer Rattler made them minced me. I mean, they made Spencer Rattler look like the Heisman candidate that everybody thought Spencer Rattler was going to be 2 years ago at Oklahoma. And I've watched a pretty bad Texas defense twice make Spencer Rattler just look pedestrian. And Tennessee couldn't do anything to slow him down. Matt Campbell's an idiot. I don't know if you guys watched the Texas Tech at Iowa State game, but he had 2 chances at the end of the game inside the 5-yard line to kick a field goal. And I know it was cold and just completely shitty weather up there. But with 5 minutes left, in the fourth quarter, you get the ball inside the 5. You got your 3 cracks to get it in the end zone. You didn't do it. Kudos to Tech's defense. They turned them out twice. But Matt Campbell, just kick the damn field goals. You win that game. I used to be a big Matt Campbell guy. I used to think, man, he does a lot with nothing. He's obviously fiery, cares about his players. And I still think those things. But coaching, he's an idiot. He's just not good. So I think it's time to put the myth to bed that Matt Campbell is like this great coach. I do think he's a great motivator. I do think he can, bring in his type of kids and get them to play for him and for each other. And they do better than they should with the talent they have. So on that point, Matt Campbell is Matt Campbell. I just sort of always conflated that with his coaching ability, and his coaching ability is ass. Sorry, Matt. Let's talk about these quick rebuilds. There's always been this talk going on about, especially from a Texas fan perspective, you've got these teams that in year 2 or in year 1 are doing amazing things. You got Tennessee, you got TCU this year, you got who else? Baylor a couple of years ago won the Big 12. Sure, there's other examples of coaches that have come in and just completely and quickly turned around the program. But how many of those actually last? How many of those have that one really good year, and then after that, it all sort of goes back to the way it was before? I think if you look at the majority of them, that's the way it goes. And I think the reason for that is not all program rebuilds are the same. Steve Sarkisian's been getting a lot of shit from a lot of people, including Texas fans, about that very subject. Like, why can't you've got more talent. Why can't you do the same thing that, say, Heupel has done at Tennessee, or the same thing that Sonny Dykes has done at TCU this year? And there's one big glaring difference between what Steve Sarkisian has to work with and what he's trying to do and what a lot of those guys have. You look at TCU, you look at Tennessee, you look at Baylor last year, those teams were senior-laden teams. They weren't super talented, obviously. They weren't like your top 5 recruiting class type teams. But they had tons of experience. You watch next year TCU, next year Tennessee, they will not be as good as they are this year. Not even close. It's the timing of it. It's what is my team made up of? And you look at Texas's teams, Steve Sarkisian turned that roster over between last season and this season. So not only did he come in late to the game from a recruiting perspective when he got hired, and still signed a pretty decent class, But then he took his team from last year and gutted it. Like something like 30 or 40 guys off that team weren't on the team this year. So he's dealing with a lot of inexperience in a lot of key positions. So that's your difference. And I'll probably talk more about, I'll probably do some more research at some point. That'll probably be like an off-season type deal for me. But these quick rebuilds, they're smoke and mirrors. Tennessee will not be the number one team in the country at any point next year. They're losing way too many players in key positions all across that team. So that's Around the Horn for today. Subscribe to the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Check it out on YouTube if you like to just watch me give this podcast. YouTube channel is Horn Takes Podcast. Find me on TikTok at Horn Takes Podcast. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns, criticisms. You guys have a good one. Hook 'em.